Hello and welcome to Witchy Woman Podcast. I am your host, DaNae Sweet, and this is episode 115. Okay, I did it again. I forgot to do the card pull before the episode started, so I'm recording this after everything. I'm going to do a little smoke cleansing, and let's pull a card. Okay, so we got a little witchy ASMR. Alright, I'm using rosemary again because I love it, and I'm a basic bitch. Okay, so I cleansed my cards with the smoke, the mic, the pot, or the computer, even though, I already did the episode and whatever. Shit happens, right? As always, I'm pulling from the Spellcasting Oracle deck, because, again, I'm boring and I'm a basic bitch. I love this deck, though, so if you love, a really beautiful, artwork, paintings is what they look like to me, and they have, little hidden images, so in the cards, if you look at a card, it may look like just a tree with somebody underneath of it, and there's, kitty cats kind of hidden in the trees, and, a bird. It's really good. Anyway, let's see what the cards are going to say about this week. Oop, we had one yeet already. Yeet. You yeeted. So, alright. I like the one that yeeted. It is the good luck card. I love this card. It is a beautiful picture of this really floofy black cat in the forest. There's ladybugs and acorns, sunflowers. It's very sunny and it's beautiful. And it's got so much imagery that corresponds with prosperity and abundance. It's got a little pot of gold even in this one. And when I see this card, I'm looking at this cat, and this cat is I am a bad bitch. So this is cats. If you've been around a cat at all, or if you own cats, you know that they're I deserve to have my entire food bowl filled. I should not see the bottom because I'm a cat and I'm worth it. So this reminds us to kind of pull in that cat energy and know and own your self-worth this week, because by doing so, you're going to change your luck. You're going to be able to bring in more happiness, abundance, prosperity, because your vibes will be vibing with those things that you want, the goals, the dreams, your manifestations. So I want to talk about this little pot of gold at the end of it, and there's this little leprechaun guy kind of watching over it. And when I see this card, it reminds us that yes, we can totally change our luck at any point. We can focus on different things and use witchcraft and change it. But if we have those little lurking negative thoughts in our minds, that self-doubt, our limiting beliefs, fears, blocks, all that stuff, it's going to be very hard for us to actually, pull in or attract more abundance and prosperity if we're feeling like we don't deserve it. So this is your reminder that you deserve it, you are worth it. Embody that kitty cat energy and, go on with your bad self. So I hope that everybody loved that card, because I kind of did. And this week, let's work on our self-talk so we can pull in and manifest the things that we want in our lives. So today, I'm sharing an interview with J. Alan Cross, author of American Brujeria. He's also on Instagram. You may recognize him from his account, Oregon Wood Witch. He shares with us what is behind his motivation for American Brujeria, his experience with particular practice in the U.S., as well as the subjects of gatekeeping and closed practices. He also writes a blog on Patheos. He has an Etsy store called Wood Witch Apothecary. He also has an amazing YouTube channel. Just search J. Alan Cross. And you can buy his book that comes out on May 1st at Amazon and bookshop.org. I will make sure all of the links to his content are in the show notes, as well as in the Witchy Woman Friends group on Facebook and in our coven. I hope that you guys enjoy this interview as much as I did, because I had a blast. I want to first say thank you to everybody who participated in all my live videos this weekend as I released my new program, Magical Mentoring. I am so excited for this. It starts on May 11th, and registration opened for the Coven on Saturday and for the public on Sunday. And I am so excited to announce the class is already full. I am so stoked, and if you missed out on this chance, please head over to my website and look at what the Magical Mentoring program offers. And I will be doing another semester of this in October. So if you would like to reserve your spot, go to the website, click on Magical Mentoring Program under Services, and it'll show you how to contact me and let me know you'd like to be in the next class that we're having. Okay, so let's just get straight into the interview. I know you guys are going to love this. By the way, his book comes out May 1st, American Brujeria, so get it. So if you want to introduce yourself to my listeners and kind of tell them a little bit about yourself and why we're talking today.
Sure. So my name is J. Allen Cross. I am a practicing witch of Mexican, Native American, and European descent. So I kind of mix all of those together, as well as my Catholic upbringing, in order to work the magic that I do. I specialize in post-colonial North American folk magic, which is a mouthful. I'm really fascinated about what happens when Christianity, especially Catholicism, is brought in and introduced to pagan people, and see what they then do with it. Because then it kind of becomes this wonderful in-between space where it's kind of two things at once. And I think really fascinating things come out of that, especially in the magical practices. I specialize heavily in something that I call American Brujeria, which is a form of modern Mexican American folk magic that we are seeing today. And it's what I have written a new book on called, of course, American Brujeria, and it's available for pre-order now and drops May 1st. You can get that on Amazon and bookshop.org.
Perfect. Okay, so right off the bat, I have a couple questions that we can start out with.
Sure.
So first of all, did your upbringing, so is this something you have learned from your childhood that your grandparents and parents have brought you up with?
Not so much from my parents and my grandparents, but it is something that I have been around. I grew up in a magical family. All of us are psychic to varying degrees. All of us do spiritual work in varying degrees. So especially all of my cousins that are kind of in the same sort of generation as me, all kind of do this work. So we have channelers and mediums and witches and healers and stuff like that in the family that I'm sort of surrounded by. I also had a very witchy mother growing up. She was the one who raised me, and she used to, read tarot cards at the dining room table and burn, blue candles with black glass in them to get rid of nasty bosses, all kinds of stuff. So, but the real kind of bringing me into the work of kind of my Mexican heritage was through my Catholic upbringing. And when people think of Catholicism, they don't necessarily think witchcraft. However, growing up, Catholic, it's a lot of lighting candles and asking for the things that you want. And then when I decided in my teen years that, Catholicism is the enemy and I hate Catholicism and I'm running away from it, I went over to witchcraft, which is supposed to be so different. And what are we doing there? Well, we are lighting candles and asking for things. And I'm like, so this is not a very big gap between these two things. So that was kind of my first understanding that something was going on there. And then over time, as we're all kind of moving to kind of reclaim our ancestral magic and, tap into, the roots of where we came from, a lot of us, especially those of us who are part of the Latinx community, are finding this work sort of in our hands by accident. Like I kind of just looked up one day and realized that my entire altar was just Guadalupe and the saints and a bunch of novena candles. And I was like, when did this happen? And that's something that's kind of happening for a lot of us right now as we're kind of, reclaiming our heritage and reconnecting with our culture. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
I think that's wonderful. I was kind of looking through the things that I knew about the things that were provided about your new book. And the thing you're talking about, the parallels between Christianity and Catholicism and kind of the witchcraft. I saw the prayer. To me, the prayer, like there's no difference to me between an incantation that I have to my deity or for what I
Mhm.
want. And when somebody's praying for something they want, I mean, they light a candle and they pray, and I light a candle and I basically do the same thing. But because I have Christian baggage, I
Mhm.
call it an incantation.
Right.
You know, that's to me the only difference is the wording and who or what deity that you're working with. So I
Mhm.
totally get that whole parallel thing, and that's something that I think a lot of the people I come in contact with, I guess, in the witchcraft and pagan community, like struggle with. Like,
Mhm.
no, 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 it's not a prayer, it's an incantation or an incantation. I'm like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I understand that. I grew up in Baptist church, but my grandparents on one side were Catholic, and it just fascinated me. I loved going to church, to the Catholic church. And at the time, it was when I was like playing around with witchcraft as a child.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, all the candles and the incense. And I was like, this is my jam. So I really enjoyed going with my grandmother. It was my great grandma, actually. So I love the imagery. I love the pageantry. I love, because I'm extra. I will admit that. I am extra. I love all the extra stuff. So, well, enough about that. I wanted to know, because I'm completely unfamiliar with Brujeria. So, where did it come from? Like, where is this term coming from? Does it come from Mexico, Central America? Does it come from one region, or is it kind of an umbrella term?
It's found all over. So
Ooh.
we have brujeria basically in every Latin American country,
Mhm.
as well as in Spain too, which is kind of where the term came from. And a lot of the magic that we're practicing, comes from Spain as well. And so it's kind of that kind of magic that was brought over from sort of the Mediterranean area, brought over into Mexico and into Cuba and Puerto Rico and Venezuela and Honduras and all these different places, where we find brujeria in basically every corner of Latin America, as well as parts of South America as well.
Well, that's
And it pulls in from a lot of different areas. It has, of course, that indigenous influence, because this isn't, specifically a Spain thing anymore. Especially when we go over to Latin America, we have this huge indigenous population that already had a wide and deep connection with the other side and with spirituality and mysticism. These were very magical, spiritual people. That then just kind of blended what they had with the newcomers to their land. And this also included too, people who were brought over from Africa as well. There's
mhm,
African influence in it all over. And that's why we also have, of course, um, varying types of brujeria.
mhm.
And same thing with like curanderismo, we find that in pretty much every Latin American country as well. But what's practiced in Mexico and what's practiced in Puerto Rico is going to be completely different. Of course, there's going to be overlap.
Right.
We're going to use some of the same things, some of the same books and whatnot.
Okay.
Um, a lot of traditional brujeria pulls from the book of Saint Cyprian.
Mhm,
So a lot of people are familiar with that.
mhm.
The type that I do, that we call American brujeria,
Yeah.
is a little bit different in the way that this always takes a little bit of unpacking. So
Mhm,
in most Latin American countries, and I am only speaking for kind of Mexico here because that's my area.
mhm.
Um, Brujeria is not misunderstood. There's this need these days to make everything, very innocent, very safe, very sanitized, and everything's just misunderstood, right? These things are actually good things. Not the case with brujeria. Brujeria, people are afraid for a reason. Very little good comes from it. It's very forceful. It's very dark. And the practice of it, I was actually speaking with somebody this morning who is a practitioner, and let me tell you, there are so many animal parts involved in this
Really?
situation.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's a whole different world. But then when we go over to what I'm calling American brujeria, I began to realize that there is this huge population of us who are both, some sort of Latinx as well as American, where
Mhm,
we're either, Puerto Rican American, Mexican American, any of these things. And those of us who have kind of tapped back into our ancestral magic and our ancestral practices have started to refer to it as brujeria, and all of our work. And what we call brujeria in the United States is very different from what we might use the term brujeria for in Mexico. So in the United States, how we kind of built our own brujeria here is with all the bits and pieces that were brought over from those who immigrated to the United States and what they could carry with them. So where in Mexico, there's a very distinct difference between brujeria, which is like, dark witchcraft, and then we have curanderismo, which is Mexican folk healing. Those are two very, very different things. However, in the United States, we tend to kind of cross both worlds and do a little bit of curanderismo, a little bit of hechiceria, all of these things together in one practice that we're now calling brujeria.
Okay.
So it's a little it's a little tough to unpack depending on where you are geographically located.
Right. I find that fascinating. I like the idea of reaching back to your roots, to your heritage and your ancestry. So I gotta ask it, because this is what's on social media right now. Everybody's arguing over what is a closed practice. Can someone like me, I have, European history and ancestry for the most part, Norse, that kind of thing, British, Irish. So if I wanted to do Olympia, is that how you say it? If I wanted to do that, could I, without offending your ancestors or, working with, would I be offensive in doing such a thing?
No. And I come across this too a lot where, like, if someone reads my book, right, and they need to use what's in it, is that okay? And the answer is yes. So say you read my book and you learn that you can take off a hex with an egg, and then one of your friends gets hexed, and that's like the only thing in your repertoire to take it off. I'm going to want you to use it. I'm not going to want you to look at your friend and go, well, looks like you're going to die because this would be cultural appropriation if I did it, right?
Okay.
I want you to feel okay utilizing it. However, it's how we utilize it, right? So if you took a hex off of somebody once using an egg and then decided that you are now a bruja and began telling everybody that you're a bruja and that you do brujeria, all this stuff, then it starts to get into kind of some murky territory, because that's not necessarily true, especially if the bulk of your work is, Norse or whatever it is you're just talking about. Then we need to kind of, it's not necessarily the use of it, it's the respect of it, it's the claiming of it as well. So like this morning, I shared this video on doing a cleansing of your home using some limes and some salt, and a lot of people were very into it, but like people are like, like, oh, like I can't use this because then that's completely damaging the culture. It's like, no, if you're alone in your house and you put some limes and some salt on a plate, no one is going to be harmed. Right. However, if you then tell everybody that you're a bruja and write a book that is not actually real brujeria and call it brujeria, then we have a problem, right? Is what happens after that.
Yeah. No, okay, that makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of that going around, a lot of misinformation on social media on what you shouldn't do. For the most part, my practice is do what you want, don't harm anybody, like just but also take no shit. But I don't claim, like I stay away from practices that I have no lineage to. Like if I want to burn something, just because of what's going around and the respect thing, I don't call it smudging. I don't do smudging ceremonies. I am a white chick who works with Norse gods. So I don't do that. I do smoke clearing. So I feel like it's very important for us to develop a language about these things that pay respect to the original culture, but also allow you to do an alternative thing. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Like the Limpy thing, like I saw that video on the house cleansing, and I've never seen that, and I thought that was fascinating. But I caught myself thinking, well, can I do that without being disrespectful to somebody else's practice? So it's usually my first thought when I see something cool that I want to try. I always check myself and go, well, should I be doing that?
Right. Well, something I kind of go into the book too is that if anyone's concerned that they are about to commit cultural appropriation, I ask them to ask themselves 3 questions. And the first question is, does this make me money? Yeah, right? Is this something that you are packaging and commodifying and selling to other people? If the answer is yes, then we're in dangerous territory already. The second question is, does this take up space? right? Like, did you see a Mexican person do this limpia, and now you're all over social media and teaching it, and then you're writing books on it or taking workshops away, things that should have gone to people of the community. And the third is, does it erase culture? And so again, you putting some limes and some salt on a plate isn't going to hurt anybody. But if you then go online 2 seconds later and say, this is a devoutly Mormon practice and it's closed to the LDS church, well, that's completely erasing, like,
Right.
that's misinformation, first of all. And second of all, that's erasing where it actually came from, right? So we need to just make sure that we're just simply being respectful. And I think that really needs to be what we talk about more than, this is closed and that's closed. And let's be honest, on social media right now, everything is closed, whether it
Yes.
should be or not. And in fact, several like marginalized communities have come forth and been like, please stop doing this,
Yeah.
because you're actually hurting us more than you're helping us. So I think the conversation needs to, of course, just be around respect. Like, are we respecting it while we're using it? And I think that's the most important part.
I think it's an absolute wonderful guidance that I will be writing down, putting in a sticky note. So when I go down that rabbit hole when I'm researching something, I can go, well, hang on just a second, and I can check myself. And I think that that's important for everybody to do if you're going to be in the spiritual community, no matter what flavor you practice. I think that's important. I had another question about the brujeria. So is this practice, like, say there's a family and the kids are practicing growing up that way, is it like a lineage thing? And I say this because you've been in the spiritual community long enough. You've heard the witches and I'm a generational witch, therefore this is how I practice. It's not the same as you. Not saying that everybody that's a generational witch is, being kind of I hate the word gatekeeping, but yes, being kind of gatekeepy. Is that how it works for you? Like, if you had children or someone to pass it on to, could you? And is that like a secret? Like, the stuff you teach them, is that something that's sacred and secret to the family?
Yes and no, in
Okay.
kind of a way. So if we're talking about real traditional brujeria, that tends to be very much kept within the family. It's very secretive, which always cracks me up when people start going on about well, this is a closed practice, so you can't do it, or am I allowed to do brujeria or whatever. It's so funny to watch people fight about whether people can or can't do it, because I'm just sitting back going, I dare you to try.
Right.
Because there is no resources out there about it. There is no information about it. People, especially from outside of the Latinx community, have tried to write books on it and have all been terribly off the mark and inaccurate in it. So there really is no way to learn unless somebody chooses to teach you.
Yes.
So fighting about whether or not people are allowed to do it or not is a moot point, because no one's going to be using it.
Right.
Period. Oh God, remind me of what your question was again.
Is it a secret practice? Like,
oh yes, the secret practice. Yes. So within traditional brujeria, yes, it's absolutely very, very secret and not something you do. In what I do, the American brujeria, it is very much also passed down in the family. That's kind of one of the main pillars of where the power comes from, because we learned all this stuff from our grandmothers and our mothers and our uncles and these people around us who believed, and they learned from their family members these odd little folk magic things that we do came from somewhere. And so that's why I talk about this in the book too. The way that your family does something is going to be way more powerful for you versus the way somebody else's family does. So when it comes to folk magic, people will squabble all over about it. If we're going to do like a cleansing with an egg, right? I heard all kinds of stuff, oh, you only do that on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or other people were like, no, it's only on Wednesdays and Fridays. And other people are like, it doesn't matter what day, as long as you're using an egg from a black hen. And nobody can agree on it, even though the basic mechanics are the same.
Right.
So the way that your family did it, it's a little bit kind of like your grandma's apple pie, right? There's 150 different ways to make an apple pie, but the way that your grandma made it even if it's not like, you know, the best apple pie you've ever had,
Yeah.
just the way that she made it is so special
Oh yeah.
and like brings back all this other stuff with it. And it's very
Right.
much the same, this sort of like,
Okay.
you know, this family lineage in it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I try to tell that when people are like asking me about witchcraft and my own practice, that's why I tell them I know a lot of us aren't generational witches. We don't have our family teaching it, but we are a starting point, and my way of practicing is going to be different than my best friends, even if we do
Mhm.
the same thing. And that's what makes our magic powerful, is it's individualized and it hits you on a soul level instead of, yes, you can read a book, you can watch YouTube videos until you're like, you know, blind, and it still wouldn't be as powerful as if you come up with some of the stuff to make it your own. I feel that it's like spice, like flavoring, like say your flavor is going to be more powerful to you than your neighbors.
Absolutely.
Okay, I had another question, because the only like, because of probably pop culture, the only practice that I knew of, like the word, would be Santeria. That's the only like Latina or Latino kind of practice that I could think of. So what is the
Mhm.
difference, or is it this, or is it the same?
It tends to be very different, actually.
Okay.
Santeria is very, very much brought over by African people, and
Okay.
then was kind of synchronized into Latino culture
Okay.
in the Caribbean, mostly. You know, places like Cuba and Puerto Rico is where we find a lot of Santeria,
Okay.
and it's really funny because, especially when the topic of saints come up,
Yeah.
it's when people get really confused about what I do versus what somebody who does Santeria does.
Okay.
So if I'm going to light a novena candle to a saint and ask them to do something for me, I am working with the Catholic saint, right? That is the spirit that I am directing this to.
Mm-hmm.
Santeria, on the other hand, is actually very powerful African spirits that are then disguised as certain saints.
Okay.
So when I light a candle to Santa Barbara, you know, Saint Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
I am praying to Saint Barbara.
Okay.
Someone from Santeria, you know, doing a candle to Saint Barbara, they're talking to Chango, who is one of the Orisha.
Okay.
So it's a little different in that way, and I really confuse people when I start talking about working with saints, because they're like, wait, but Catholicism can't be anywhere near witchcraft, so you're talking about Santeria? And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual Catholic saints. And
Okay.
they're like, what? How does that work?
Well, that makes so much more sense, because I had no idea what the difference was. I figured there was a difference. I just
Yeah,
didn't know, because, you know, I don't know.
yeah.
Um, a couple of the questions that I asked the coven, I want to ask you these. We had so much interest in this topic, by the way, like they are hungry for this information.
Oh, good.
So one of them asked, let's see. So what is your favorite part, or what is the thing that you lean on the most in your practice? Like on a daily
Mm.
thing.
Faith.
Yeah.
Faith is a really big part of it. So when we're talking about this work that I do, this American Brujeria, which is kind of a hodgepodge of all the little broken pieces that immigrants could bring over into the new world with
Mhm.
them. That's kind of been put into a big pile and is being utilized by, you know, Mexican American folks, or, you know, other, you know, Latin American folks
Mhm.
here in the United States. And so it has three main pillars in it. One of them I was just talking about, you know, with the family tradition is really important.
Mhm.
And then of course we have the earth, which provides, you know, beautiful things to us, sacred things like corn and the herbs that we use. And, you know, the earth was sacred to our ancestors. And the other one is faith.
Yes.
This and it's something that I don't find many other places than in folk magic,
Mhm.
where we have such an intensity of belief in God and the saints and, you know, La Virgen de Guadalupe, you know, all
Mhm.
these higher spirits, that we tend to strip away a lot of the ceremony and a lot of the bells and whistles and a lot of the really fancy elaborate things. We tend to do away with that and
Mhm.
just say, look, God, I need help. And there's something so honest about it. And it's so beautifully pure. I often feel a bit like I'm doing a trust fall
Hmm.
with the divine, because it happens with me and my spirits all the time, where I'll go to do a spell, and it's something that I might not feel secure in pulling off. So then my brain starts going, okay, well, we're going to need to take all of these steps, and we're going to have to add this in and 5 herbs and 2 stones and blah, blah, blah. And the spirits are just kind of like, bro, no. Like, what happens if you use just a candle?
Yep.
And you pray and you mean it and you have faith that we will come through for you. And I'm like, are you sure I don't need the other stuff? They're like, we're sure. So it's a lot about for me right now, it's faith that everything will work out, and that there is something on the other side that's backing me up. And the more I kind of do this sort of trust fall thing, where I just kind of let it go and be in the hands of spirit, the more powerful and the more interesting results come. So now these days, if there's something that I really, really need,
Hmm.
I light a tea light candle.
Yep.
And I say a prayer.
That is beautiful. And that's the one thing that I try to similarly project my beliefs about that. Like, I feel like witchcraft in general, like for us, is highly commercialized, and it's like you need all the shit. You need all the stuff in order to do this thing. And like when I show how I do things, I use tea lights because you can buy like 50 of them for $2 at the dollar store. Like it's all about how you feel inside about what you did, whether I'm working with my pagan deities or just your higher self, because we do have secular witches that just practice witchcraft as a secular practice, and they're relying on their own power, their inner self, their higher self. If you believe and have faith in what you're doing and who you are calling on to help you attempt or attract the thing that you're wanting, then that's what matters, not the 10 pounds of herbs you pile on top of a jar candle or whatever else that you'll see online. That's at its core, I think that's what spirituality is in general, is having faith and having the freedom to give yourself the freedom to free fall, like you were talking about. And that's a beautiful gift that you give yourself, because that's what yields amazing results for your life, even with that faith. And often I get the accusation that if you're not religious and you're just spiritual, you can't achieve that. But I don't believe that. I think that faith is faith. No matter what what flavor that you are practicing, faith is faith, and it's beautiful. Another question that I had was, when did you realize this was something that you're going to be doing as like a purpose? Like this was something that was going to encompass your life more than just, Sunday I'm gonna go light a candle and go about my day. When was that for you?
Very, very early.
Yeah.
I've always known, and I've known very specifically too, and I don't know why or how, but I always knew that the word was witch, and that is what I was. I always felt very, very different from the other people that were around me. Before I could read, I would carry around, because of course I was raised Catholic, and I would carry around one of our family Bibles. And, Bibles are always these big, heavy, kind of leather bound tomes. And so I would carry it around and I would tell people it was my spell book. And then flash forward, it is my spell book. And I remember once too, I was really young. It was before I was reading or writing, because I remember I had to ask someone to help me. It was during the summer, and all of my friends were putting up signs to mow lawns and, pick up trash, or, doing lemonade stands to like make some money. And I'm like, I need a job this summer. I'm like 5. So I asked my father to help me make flyers just for my services as an exorcist. And that was the word too that I was using at that time. And then we flash forward, that's again what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
then in fifth grade too, we had to do a project on what we wanted to do, like for a job. Like, what did we want to be when we grew up?
Right.
I did mine on how I was going to be a witch that was casting spells for people and breaking hexes and stuff. And my teacher made me redo it because she felt I wasn't taking it seriously.
Oh no.
And well, joke is on her.
Yeah.
So this has been a calling for me from the very, very beginning. This is something that I've always known would happen. I have tried to avoid it. I have tried to fight it. I have tried to be super duper normal. Turns out that's just not in the cards for me.
No, I think that that's common, that I hear from a lot of people that are doing this kind of work, that whether it's being an author or a teacher or whatever in the spiritual community, is you can, at some point you're like, I just want to be normal.
Right.
And that never works out.
Yeah, no.
Spirit doesn't have it in the cards for you to be normal. I think that people like you and other authors that are speaking out and teaching this kind of information are special to humanity, and this is like very important work, and normal would just not be enough.
Definitely not. Sometimes you just got to get weird with it.
Yes. It's my daughter always tells me that I fly my freak flag higher than most people. So that's kind of her way of saying, Mom, you're weird, but it's cool. Let me get back to the questions. So here's a good one that I love this. Okay, so what other practices do you practice? Any other things with your brujeria? Like I'm a pagan, but there are times that I do work with angels and things like that. I cross over. Can you do that in your practice?
Yes.
Okay.
So mostly I practice kind of North American folk magic. I sort of specialize in, the American Southwest territories where a lot of the work I'm talking about comes from. But I am fascinated by all forms of folk magic. Italian folk magic, I'm not necessarily Italian myself, but it is so extremely similar to what I practice. That I absolutely adore it. I read on it, and it's really helpful too for filling in some of the gaps, things like that. And again, that's kind of like where the cultural appropriation comes in, right? So like, I can get a book on Italian magic and work with it. If I go outside though and start telling people I'm a strega or however we say that,
right.
then it becomes a problem, right? You're like, that is not my practice, but it is something that's very, very helpful. I also have a deep love of Pennsylvania Dutch folk magic. It is just so beautiful, and I love their philosophy on a lot of things and their healing practice and just kind of how they go about things. I think it's really, really neat. And I want a house specifically so that I can have a really beautiful hex sign on the front of it.
Yes, that's the one thing around. So I live in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska, but there are some really old barns with those hex symbols. And I'm like, every time I drive by one, I'm like, Brad, this is my husband, I'm like, hey, look at that. I wonder if they even know, the current owner even knows what that is. So that just always fascinates me to see that stuff. Or I giggle when the church ladies over here have a quilt the quilt contest and selling, and it's those kinds of designs. So
like, if you only knew.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a book you should read. Have you heard? So I got a new book, and it's on Appalachian folk magic, and I haven't really delved into that stuff. But have you heard of that or read anything about it that you use?
I don't tend to work with that so much. It tends to be a little bit of a mystery to me. I did buy. Were you reading Jake Richards' book? That's the one that most of us have. I do own it, and it is a good book. That particular style of magic I haven't connected too deeply with. That seems very far removed kind of from what I do, even though there's of course a lot of overlap in what we all do. That seems to be kind of a mystery area for me. So maybe at some point I will dive into that a little bit more.
The same for me. I haven't connected to it yet, but I find it interesting. I call myself, I'm an information whore. Like I can't help it. I have to know the things just so I can point somebody to the right book or the right thing, because I get
Mhm.
a lot of questions, and I know I only know what I know,
Right.
I need
Well,
to
and it's
have good resources for other people.
yeah, it's so important to have that education too. Something, oh God help me, I recently joined TikTok,
Oh, same.
and I posted one thing on like, hi, like here are some great books on Mexican folk magic,
Yeah.
and all the comments were like, and no one is allowed to buy them or read them, and I'm like, why? And
Yeah.
they're like, because other people from other cultures should not learn about ours, and I'm like, okay, that's not social justice, that's nationalism, and that gets very, very sketch very quickly. So this idea that we can't educate ourselves about other cultures, other practices is very scary to me. I think it's very important that we do educate ourselves, because I mean, and it's even been proven that when we do that, we're less likely to be racist towards the people that we actually understand.
Yes.
So if the idea is to battle racism, then we should be trying to get people to read about our cultures and our beliefs and our practices so that they understand them.
Yeah, I just got a book on Marie Laveau, and it's not like I'm going to go practice that,
Right.
but I just want to know about it. I want to know her history. I want to know the history of her beliefs and where it came from, and because it's part of American culture, like it's part of
Yeah.
America's in general. So I want to know.
Yeah.
I'm going to go practice it or charge for spell work using that practice. That would be
Absolutely.
wrong.
Hmm.
TikTok in me, I have a love hate. I love it because I love little animal videos and I'm
Yeah.
addicted to those. But I hate witch
Yes.
talk. It's the most toxic thing. I think it's awful. I constantly am getting in my Facebook groups and in my coven, I'm constantly getting questions. Hey, I saw on TikTok that I
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing this. Oh my gosh. One girl texted me like upset. Like she's like, I am crying because I thought I did something terrible, and she was doing tarot readings. And they told her tarot is closed, and she just felt so
Oh,
terrible that she like offended an entire culture. I'm like, oh honey. So
no.
yeah, TikTok has good and bad. If we could
Mhm.
just get rid of that part of it,
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
great.
that's one of the big kind of discussions we've been having, because so what's been happening is there's a lot of closed groups on social media, whether they're closed Facebook groups or they're private discords or things like that, where people all group up and get themselves into kind of like a social justice tizzy and decide that the only way to fix this is to cancel everything.
Yeah.
And on top of that, TikTok people too have found out that if they go on and they make a very dramatic video that's like, hey, you guys, this thing is closed, we really need to talk about it, then they get an absurd number of hits. Suddenly that
Yep.
goes viral because people are commenting, people are liking, people are doing all this stuff.
Yep.
And so it gets them a whole lot of clout. The unfortunate part, though, is all of that is a great, wonderful way to avoid doing the actual anti-racist work that's been asked of us.
Yes. Yes.
And it ends up hurting these cultures,
Mhm.
because I've talked with Jewish people lately who have been like, I can't talk about Judaism online because allies attack me because they don't believe I'm Jewish. I can't prove it to them enough that I'm Jewish.
Oh.
Or something else, with the tarot reading too, Romani people have come forth and been like, number one, not only is this not true, but this is actually a really harmful racist
It
stereotype that
is.
we're all, tarot card reading fortune tellers, like, and
Yeah.
I think that's something that really needs to be addressed. Like, we need to remember it's about respect. It's not necessarily about proving that you have the genetics to do something.
Absolutely. I love that. There's a lot, and that's what I would like new TikTok users like, and I loathe the term baby witch. Like that, like things trigger me, but that one, like nobody calls you a baby Christian or a baby Buddhist or a baby like that's not, no. You're a witch, claim it. You just are less educated right now.
Right.
That's it.
Though I will say that baby Buddhist does sound adorable.
It does sound
I'm
super
like,
cute, and I may have a little statue of a baby Buddha. So,
ah, yeah.
but that kind of stuff, like that will I think that for one, take away the baby witch thing, because one, I've seen people lean on it as an excuse to do things that they're not, they know better. They know better
Mhm.
than to do it, but they do it anyway because they're a baby witch. Like that needs to be
Mhm.
taken away, because I think that lessens accountability within the community.
Mm.
I think that just because you're new doesn't mean that you should be okay with being disrespectful
Yep.
or racist
Absolutely.
or exclusionary.
Mhm.
That kind of thing needs to stop. Let me go back to the things. Okay. So if somebody, jeez, my speech. So if someone was to buy like an oil or something from a shop like yours online. And so I honor, pagan gods, and I got a oil from you. How does that work within the interpractice type communication, I guess? How does that work, or does it?
It totally works.
Okay.
So and I think the only time that you would have a problem would be like if you bought an oil that was specifically dedicated to a certain saint and then tried to use it with Freya or something.
Right.
I mean, clearly that would be an issue, but like, if you bought a bring love oil
Mm-hmm.
from me and
Okay.
then used it on a pink candle to Freya or something like that,
That would be
that would be totally fine.
okay.
Yeah.
And I had a question. So I was watching your YouTube videos. So for those of you out there, he does have YouTube videos that you can look at. I was watching the one about the double action candles, the ones of the reversal ones.
Yeah.
So it comes with the wick standing up on one end, and you end up flipping it over. So this is something that I don't do in my practice, but I found it interesting. So if I didn't flip it over, that would be a cursing candle. Like, what does that mean? Because
no, it just wouldn't work in the same way. So for those of you who are listening, what we're talking about is a double action candle, which you will find normally as like a stick candle, where it will be half black on the bottom and then half a different color, like white, green, or red are the most common ones. And what we do with those is we use those to reverse some sort of magic that's been put on us. And in order to do that, we have to do something called budding the candle, which is where you cut off the tip of the candle, kind of where it comes to a point and has the wick. You cut that off so that it's flat, and you turn the whole candle over. So the black half that was on the bottom is now on the top. And then you carve that until you expose the wick, and then you burn the candle like that. So you're technically burning it kind of upside down, even if the wick is on top.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we do that, number one, the flipping action is really important, because that's the whole part of what we want to do is we want to turn something around.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's some sort of a hex that was on us.
Right.
And burning the black part first is really important, because that's the part that takes off what was on us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the color part is there to restore what was taken. So say I have a financial, like my money has been crossed up real bad, and I need to reverse that. So I would get a double action candle that is black on the bottom and green on top. And then I would cut off the top, flip it over so the black is on top and the green is on bottom.
Okay.
So that when I burn it, the black burns first, getting rid of the curse on my money. And then the green burns second, which is helping to bring in more prosperity, to replace what was taken. And if we do that the other way around, and if we burn it right side up, number one, we're not reversing anything. We're just bringing in more money and then asking that curse be taken off, which if you bring in the money when the curse is still there, it's a little like, when you're trying to brush your teeth, but you're also eating Oreos at the same time. It's just not going to be a good day for you. We got to do one thing at a time, right? We got to take off the curse. Once that's been taken care of, then we can focus on our money.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted you to clear it up because I know that I've had questions about those kinds of spells, and I do those differently in my practice. I've never done it that way. So I found that interesting, and like the action of turning it over is, one of the main important things in that particular candle spell. So I thought that was neat to see, because I've seen those a lot sold, and I haven't actually used one yet. So maybe I'll have to.
It's really exciting when you get to tell people that you burn your candles upside down. It sounds really witchy, and people are like, what? How does that even work?
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so what else so if I wanted to include some of the things you talk about in your book, and I am not a Christian, how does that work? So if I do one of your spells, it's going to probably have a saint the actual, like you're saying, the actual saint in it. If I want to do that and I am not Christian, but I understand that I'm working with that particular saint, is that okay?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Okay.
You have to believe that
Yes.
they're real, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to believe that they can help you,
Yes.
and you have to at least be in alignment with what they stand for.
Right.
A lot of the times I'll get people for some reason who will come to me a lot. They'll be like, I want to practice what you practice, but I hate God. I don't believe in
Oh,
any of that Christianity stuff, and I don't want any part of it. And I'm like,
well, that ain't gonna work.
and why are you here? That's like signing up to be on the swim team and then refusing to get into the pool.
Okay.
Like there's
I love that.
there's so yeah. Right. And I don't mean to tell anybody that they have to identify as Christian or
Right.
support the Christian church or go to church on Sunday,
Right.
any of that stuff, but they do have to believe.
Yeah.
And if you believe, then you're probably a little closer to it than you might want to think you are.
Yeah.
But that's a take for another time.
Right. Right. And my take on other practices besides my own is I do not deny anybody's else's God's existence. That would
Mhm.
be very small-minded of me, and actually pretty pompous for me to say there's no Christian God, there's no saints, there's no angels. That would be exactly what, some of, my relatives would say about my practice, and that would be hypocritical of me. So I do not ever deny anybody else's God's existence. I feel that
Mhm.
that's a very important thing to have. I may not honor or follow that particular flavor of spirituality, but I don't deny it either. And I think that's
Yeah.
important for people that are going to be in the spotlight. Like, I didn't intend for the podcast to be a spotlight thing, but it is. And I always am making sure, because I get a lot of questions and a lot of comments about Christianity hate, and we cannot
Mhm.
hate on Christianity because that's hypocritical of us.
Right.
And I try to make sure that they understand, like, they don't have to, nobody else has to do the same thing I do, but I try to
Mm.
be an example of tolerance
Yes.
for other flavors.
Absolutely. And two, I think what it really comes down to, and something that I try to explain to people, is separating Christianity from the church and Christian people.
Yep.
Those are two very different things. People are like, oh, well, the Pope did this thing. It's like, yeah, the Pope is awful. I do not support any
Right.
of that stuff.
Mhm.
However, I do believe that these spirits exist, and that if I say these prayers, things happen, and, that there is meaning to these things.
Right.
So being able to separate kind of the awful things that have been done in God's name versus things that have been done by God.
Yes.
And so, I always tell people, especially if they're really struggling with kind of healing and integrating their Christian upbringing,
Mhm.
I cannot recommend the work of Nadia Bolz-Weber enough.
Okay.
She is a Lutheran pastor. She's like 6 feet tall, covered in tattoos. She's a recovering addict,
Oh, good for her.
swears like a sailor. She runs she used to run House for All Sinners and Saints in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And their congregation was just like green haired people with mohawks and queer people and like, addicts. But also in there was, lovely little old Christian ladies who are
Right.
your kind of stereotypical run of the mill,
Mhm.
all kind of blended together. And she has an interview on the Rich Roll podcast,
Mhm.
which was so healing for me and my Catholic upbringing, as well as her first book, Pastrix, which is kind of a derogatory name for a female pastor. She's a
Yeah.
pastrix.
Oh, gee.
And it's just her work and kind of talking about her damaging upbringing,
Yeah.
from the church versus what she's found God to actually be like. She
Mhm.
has a chapter in it that she calls God's Aunt, and it's about her time with paganism and getting to know the goddess and how healing that was for her.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to check her stuff out. I want to say I've seen her, like, does she have? Is she the one that wears like the traditional
Mhm.
pastor? Okay, I've seen her with all
Yeah.
her tattoos, in some videos and things on social media. So I'll definitely have
Mhm.
to check out her book. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think that has I mean, it's not the same, but there's a parallel in the magical community with Wicca and the D-bag gardener. Like
Yeah.
just because he was a douche doesn't mean that, you can throw away or cancel Wicca. Like
Yeah.
that's not fair. So I try to point that out when I get those kind of things. You can't cancel Christianity because of some bad people, because we're human and we're gonna have, not so savory people in any faith.
Yeah.
So same with Wicca. Like you can't cancel it. You don't have to follow it, but don't cancel it because of Gerald Gardner. So,
Absolutely.
cool. Let me see if I have any. Cause you've hit on most of the questions they already had anyway. I think that's so let's talk about circle back around to the book.
Mhm.
First of all, when did you know you were going to write it?
A little over a year ago, I actually, so I was trying to meet with my editor, and I had sent her an absolutely different book.
Ooh.
And I realized that I was struggling with that book because of the framing of it. It was something I was like, "Oop, Mayday, that was a mistake."
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, God, like, what am I going to bring to her? What am I going to bring to her? And one of my friends was like, "Why don't you write a book on brujeria?" And I'm like, "I don't do brujeria, like traditional Mexico brujeria. Like, I don't know that. I'd have to fly to Mexico, live with some 500-year-old lady for like 15 years before I knew anything about brujeria."
Right.
Um, so, but then as I'm thinking about like, what am I going to write? What am I going to write? I'm looking around and I'm realizing I have these statues of Guadalupe. I have all of these saints candles. I have all this stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, I'm like, so even if it's not like traditional brujeria, Mexican American people living in the United States, we're kind of an island unto ourselves, where we're somewhere between like the old ways and the new ways. And we all kind of have this very similar way of working, which is, by combining all these pieces of Mexican magic into one practice.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, someone needs to write a book for us, the people who are in between, the people who are both Mexican and American, because we feel very isolated as people who are two things at once. Because the Mexicans look at us and they're like, "Oh, you're not a real Mexican," and then so we go over to the white Americans and then they call you racial slurs, and then you're like, "Well, okay, so apparently I don't belong anywhere except for in the middle."
Right.
And in these spaces where we are kind of isolated, we tend to develop our own methods of accomplishing things. And one of those things is folk magic. So I started to realize, I'm like, oh, this is actually a thing. This is a thing that we're doing. It's not just me, it's all these people around me. My story is not unique. This is something a lot of people kind of go with.
Mhm.
And so in the book, I liken us, Mexican American people, to a liminal space, like a crossroads, because we are both Mexican and we are American. We are both and we are neither at the same time, which makes us very uniquely magical. Magic has always taken place on the fringes, not, in one particular society or the other. It's always happened kind of on the outskirts. And we are kind of a fringe group that's happening here. So drawing attention to the fact that, number one, we are valid people who do exist. And also affirming that we are also very powerful people who are a bridge between two different worlds. And that means something.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely love that. I think that this book is going to do a lot of good for a lot of people, and I urge like people like me who are pagan and super pasty white. I mean, I like glow. I cannot wait to read this book so that I know what it is about, how I can integrate it into the things I do in a respectful way if I choose to do so. And like you said, it's educating everybody so that we can be more respectful with each other, and like you said, fight racism on a real level. And education, real education, valid education is how that happens on all levels, for everybody. So I am so excited to get this. So where can they buy this again?
Yes. So currently, I'm not sure when this episode is coming out, but currently it is available for pre-order on Amazon and bookshop.org. Those are two great options for purchasing. The book comes out May 1st. And so if you're listening to this after that date, you could probably go and get it from your local witchy bookstore, which is great. And the book is called American Brujeria.
Perfect. Where can they find you on your socials?
Yes. So I am, I've been saying this on podcasts for years. I'm working on a website. It is still coming. But right now you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Oregon Wood Witch with little underscores in between the words. You can find me there. Stay up to date with what's happening with, the book, what I'm doing. You can book services with me there. I offer everything from spell service, where I'll cast a spell for you. I'll do tarot readings for you. I offer magical coaching, which is like, if you need to learn something or you're trying to work on a new skill, I will sit down with you and give you advice and walk you through it and teach you things. So these are all things that I offer. You can also find my my Pathos column there, as well as my little Etsy store.
Cool. I love that. I think that I was diving into your Pathos articles, and that like sent me down a rabbit hole that I'm still not out of yet. I'm still reading them all. So I found them very, very interesting. I love things that, I don't do because, like I said before, I'm an information whore and I need that stuff. I don't know why. Yes. I just need it.
Yeah, gotta know. That's important. And I love that curiosity and that hunger for information.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for talking on the podcast. I know that I have a handful in the coven that are going to flip out when they find out that you were on the podcast. I cannot wait to see their faces when I announce it. So thank you so very much. I know that you've literally made some of these witches days. Like they're going to freak. So you're kind of a celebrity. You're big. So thank you so very much. I appreciate you coming on. And if you we should plan something for when the book does come out again, and do some kind of thing. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also offering too, for anyone who is doing like a book club reading with the book, that I will meet all y'all on Zoom, or I'll Skype in or something and discuss the book with y'all for a little while. So if that's something that any of your coven members do, yeah.
Yes, we've been discussing setting up a book group for us. So this may be like our maiden launch when we can do something with that. That would be great. I would love that. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.